Emily Carter had always believed in doing her best, no matter the situation. At 28, she was a hardworking employee at a mid-sized marketing firm in New York City, known for her creativity and diligence. Despite her talent, however, Emily often felt overlooked. Her innovative ideas were frequently dismissed by her superiors, and promotions seemed reserved for those who played politics rather than those who delivered results. Still, Emily refused to let frustration dim her spirit. Every day, she arrived early, stayed late, and poured her energy into projects that others might have considered thankless. She reminded herself that success wasn't always immediate. It was about persistence, patience, and staying true to her values. One dreary afternoon, as rain poured relentlessly over Manhattan, Emily found herself working late yet again. The office buzzed with the hum of computers and hurried conversations until most employees trickled out, eager to escape the storm. By the time Emily packed up her things, the streets outside were slick with rain, reflecting the glow of streetlights like shattered mirrors. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, umbrella in hand, she noticed an elderly man struggling against the downpour. His suit was soaked, his cane splashing through puddles as he hobbled along. Something about his vulnerability tugged at Emily's heartstrings. Without hesitation, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice slightly over the patter of rain. "Would you like to use my umbrella?" The man looked startled but grateful. "That's very kind of you, young lady, but I couldn't possibly." "I insist," Emily interrupted gently, already holding out the umbrella. "Please take it. I'll be fine." He hesitated before accepting it, his eyes softening with appreciation. "Thank you," he murmured. "You've saved me from catching a cold or worse." Before leaving, he asked for her name. "Emily Carter," she replied with a polite smile. "Take care of yourself." As Emily walked home in the rain, her clothes clinging damply to her skin, she didn't think much of the encounter. To her, lending her umbrella had been nothing more than a simple act of kindness. Little did she know, the man she'd helped was none other than Mr. Benjamin Hayes, the reclusive founder and majority shareholder of her company, and her life was about to change forever. The next morning, Emily arrived at work as usual, her damp clothes from the previous evening long forgotten. She settled into her desk, sipping coffee while reviewing spreadsheets and preparing for another day of being overlooked. Her boss breezed past her cubicle without so much as a glance, already barking orders to the team about an upcoming campaign. But across town, Mr. Benjamin Hayes was thinking about Emily, and not just because of the umbrella she'd lent him. That small act of kindness had stirred something deep within him. As he dried off and warmed up in his penthouse apartment, he couldn't shake the image of her smiling face or the genuine concern in her voice when she insisted he take her umbrella. In a world that often felt cold and transactional, Emily's selflessness stood out like a beacon. Curious to learn more about her, Mr. Hayes began digging into her background. He accessed employee records, not out of suspicion, but out of admiration, and discovered that Emily had been with the company for 5 years. Despite her relatively junior title, her contributions were anything but minor. She had spearheaded several successful campaigns, suggested cost-saving strategies, and even mentored new hires, all without seeking recognition. Yet, her efforts had gone largely unnoticed by upper management. Intrigued, Mr. Hayes decided to observe the company firsthand. The following day, disguised in a simple suit and tie, he visited the office under the pretense of conducting a routine inspection. Employees scrambled to tidy their desks and appear busy, unaware they were being watched by the man who owned the majority stake in the business. From the corner of the break room, Mr. Hayes observed Emily interacting with her colleagues. She patiently explained a complex task to a confused intern, offered constructive feedback during a brainstorming session, and stayed late to help a coworker finish a presentation. Her demeanor was calm, humble, and professional, a stark contrast to the entitled attitudes he noticed among some senior staff. Later that evening, as employees filed out of the building, Mr. Hayes approached Emily again. This time, he introduced himself properly. "Miss Carter," he said, extending a hand, "I believe this belongs to you." He held out the umbrella she'd lent him, now neatly folded. Emily blinked in surprise, recognizing him immediately. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't realize. Thank you for returning it." He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Miss Carter, for everything." Though Emily didn't understand the weight of his words at the time, Mr. Hayes left the office that night with a renewed sense of purpose. Over the years, he had grown disillusioned with the direction of the company, frustrated by its lack of innovation and ethical leadership. But meeting Emily reminded him of the values upon which he'd built the business: integrity, creativity, and compassion. That evening, sitting alone in his study, Mr. Hayes made a decision. It was time for a change. Not just in strategy, but in leadership. And he knew exactly who should lead the charge. Meanwhile, back at the office, life resumed as usual for Emily. She continued tackling projects with quiet determination, unaware that her simple act of kindness had caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in the industry. Little did she know, her life and the future of the entire company was about to be transformed. The next morning, Emily arrived at work feeling no different than any other day. She grabbed her usual coffee from the break room, greeted a few colleagues with polite smiles, and settled into her desk. The office buzzed with its typical energy: keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and hushed conversations about weekend plans. But something was off. A palpable tension hung in the air, though Emily couldn't quite place it. By mid-morning, whispers spread like wildfire. Mr. Benjamin Hayes, the reclusive founder of the company, had arrived unannounced and was holding an emergency meeting with senior executives. Employees exchanged nervous glances, speculating what this sudden visit could mean. Was he dissatisfied with performance? Had profits plummeted? No one knew for sure. Meanwhile, inside the boardroom, chaos erupted. Mr. Hayes wasted no time mincing words. "This company is failing," he declared bluntly, his sharp gaze scanning the room. "Not because of external factors, but because of poor leadership. We've become complacent, uninspired, and disconnected from our core values." The current CEO, Gregory Lane, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Gregory had been coasting for years, relying on outdated strategies and prioritizing short-term gains over long-term vision. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but Mr. Hayes cut him off. "I've spent the past week observing operations," Mr. Hayes continued, his tone firm but calm, "and I've seen enough to know that the person best suited to lead this company isn't sitting at this table." Gasps rippled through the room. Executives exchanged bewildered looks, unsure whether they should feel insulted or intrigued. Before anyone could respond, Mr. Hayes pressed a button on the conference phone. "Send her in." A moment later, the door opened, and Emily stepped hesitantly into the room. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene: the stunned faces of her superiors, the weight of Mr. Hayes' presence, and the gravity of whatever was about to happen. "Emily Carter," Mr. Hayes announced, standing up. "Effective immediately, you are the new CEO of this company." For a beat, there was silence. Then the room exploded into murmurs of disbelief. Gregory looked like he'd been slapped, while others stared at Emily as if seeing her for the first time. As for Emily herself, she stood frozen, clutching her notebook tightly. I don't understand," she stammered, shaking her head. "I'm just an assistant. I can't." "You can," Mr. Hayes interrupted firmly. "And you will. Your actions speak louder than any resume, Miss Carter. You've shown integrity, compassion, and vision. All qualities this company desperately needs. It's time we stop rewarding mediocrity and start empowering those who truly care." Emily's mind raced. This had to be a mistake. Surely someone more experienced, more qualified, should take the reins. But before she could protest further, Mr. Hayes placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I wouldn't have chosen you if I didn't believe you were ready," he said quietly. "Trust me, and trust yourself." With that, the decision was final. Gregory was escorted out of the room, visibly humiliated, while Emily was left to absorb the enormity of what had just happened. Colleagues filed out of the boardroom, some congratulating her awkwardly, others whispering behind her back. For the first time in her career, Emily felt both exhilarated and terrified. Over the next few hours, Mr. Hayes guided Emily through the basics of her new role. He introduced her to key executives, reviewed financial reports, and outlined immediate priorities. Though overwhelmed, Emily resolved to rise to the occasion, not just for herself, but for the company and everyone counting on her. By the end of the day, as she sat alone in the corner office that now belonged to her, Emily realized one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again, and neither would the future of the company. Emily's first few weeks as CEO were a whirlwind of challenges and adjustments. Walking into the office each morning felt surreal. Employees who once barely acknowledged her now greeted her with deference, and meetings that she'd previously attended as a silent observer now required her to lead discussions and make critical decisions. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, but Emily refused to let doubt consume her. She reminded herself daily why Mr. Hayes had chosen her. Not for her title or experience, but for her integrity, creativity, and compassion. Her initial days were marked by skepticism from senior staff. Many questioned whether someone so young and relatively inexperienced could handle the pressures of leading a company. Some openly challenged her ideas during strategy sessions, while others whispered behind closed doors about how long she'd last in the role. But Emily didn't let their doubts deter her. Instead, she leaned into her strengths, approaching every challenge with humility and determination. One of her first moves was to restructure the company's creative process. For years, innovative ideas had been stifled by rigid hierarchies and risk-averse leadership. Emily changed that by implementing open-floor brainstorming sessions, where employees at all levels were encouraged to share their thoughts without fear of judgment. To her delight, these sessions yielded fresh perspectives and bold concepts that revitalized stagnant campaigns. One junior designer, inspired by Emily's inclusive approach, pitched an unconventional marketing strategy that ended up doubling engagement rates for a major client. Emily also prioritized transparency within the organization. She held regular town hall meetings, inviting employees to voice concerns, ask questions, and celebrate wins together. These gatherings fostered a sense of community and trust, breaking down barriers between departments and creating a more cohesive workplace culture. Her authenticity resonated with the team, earning her respect even from former skeptics. Under her leadership, the company began to thrive again. Campaigns became more innovative, client satisfaction soared, and profits steadily climbed. But Emily's impact extended beyond business metrics. She championed initiatives to support employee well-being, such as flexible work hours, mental health resources, and professional development programs. She also launched a mentorship initiative pairing seasoned executives with entry-level staff, ensuring that knowledge and opportunities flowed freely throughout the organization. Throughout this period, Emily maintained a close relationship with Mr. Hayes, who continued to serve as both a mentor and confidant. They met regularly over coffee, discussing everything from strategic decisions to personal growth. During one such meeting, Mr. Hayes shared a story about the early days of the company, how he'd started it in his garage with nothing but a dream and a commitment to ethical practices. "You remind me of myself back then," he said with a warm smile. "Not because you're perfect, but because you care deeply about doing what's right. That's rare these days." Emily blushed at the compliment but nodded thoughtfully. "I couldn't have done any of this without your faith in me," she replied. "But I'm learning every day, and I won't stop until this company reflects the values you built it on." As months turned into a year, Emily's transformation from overlooked assistant to respected CEO became undeniable. Clients praised her forward-thinking approach, employees admired her empathetic leadership style, and industry publications hailed her as a rising star in the marketing world. Yet, despite her success, Emily remained grounded. She never forgot the kindness that had brought her here, a borrowed umbrella, and made it a point to pay it forward whenever possible. Whether it was mentoring struggling interns, advocating for fair wages, or organizing charity drives, Emily ensured that compassion remained at the heart of everything she did. Under her guidance, the company wasn't just profitable, it was purposeful. Little did Emily realize, however, that her journey was far from over. With each decision she made, She carried forward not only her own dreams but also the legacy of the man who had believed in her when no one else did. Years passed, and under Emily's leadership, the company flourished in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a mid-sized marketing firm struggling to keep up with industry trends was now a powerhouse known for its innovation, ethical practices, and employee-centric culture. Clients flocked to work with them, not just because of their results but because of the values they represented, values that Emily championed every single day. Emily never lost sight of the moment that changed her life. Lending her umbrella to a stranger on a rainy afternoon. That small act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, propelling her into a position where she could make a real difference, not just within the company but in the lives of countless others. To honor that moment, she established an annual tradition called the Umbrella Initiative. Each year, employees were encouraged to perform random acts of kindness in their communities, from volunteering at shelters to mentoring underserved youth. The initiative became a cornerstone of the company's identity, inspiring both employees and clients alike. One evening, as Emily prepared for a charity gala celebrating the company's success, she reflected on how far she'd come. Standing on the balcony of her office, overlooking the glittering city skyline, she thought about Mr. Hayes and the faith he'd placed in her. Though he had retired completely by now, his influence lingered in everything she did. At the gala, Emily delivered a heartfelt speech to a room filled with colleagues, clients, and friends. "Success isn't measured by titles or wealth," she said, her voice steady yet emotional. "It's measured by the lives you touch along the way. When I lent my umbrella to a stranger years ago, I didn't expect anything in return. But that simple gesture reminded me of something profound. Kindness always finds its way back." As she spoke, her eyes landed on a familiar figure sitting near the front of the room. Mr. Benjamin Hayes, frail but smiling proudly. Their eyes met, and Emily felt a surge of gratitude. After the event, she approached him, taking his hand gently. "I owe you everything," she said softly. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Mr. Hayes chuckled warmly. "No, Emily, you proved yourself. I simply gave you the chance to shine." They shared a quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of conversation and laughter. Both knew that their partnership, born out of kindness and mutual respect, had transformed not just a company but an entire community. As Emily walked away from the gala later that night, she paused beneath the same awning where she'd first encountered Mr. Hayes all those years ago. A light drizzle began to fall, and she smiled, pulling her own umbrella open. Life had come full circle, and she carried the lessons of that rainy day with her always. Years later, Emily stood on the balcony of her corner office, gazing out at the city she'd helped transform. The company was thriving, celebrated not only for its success but for its commitment to kindness and innovation. Employees referred to her as a leader who led with heart, and clients praised her ability to balance creativity with compassion. She often thought about the ripple effect of that rainy afternoon, the way one small act of generosity had changed the trajectory of her life and the lives of so many others. It wasn't just about the umbrella. It was about the belief that even in chaotic moments, there's always an opportunity to make someone's day better. As she reflected, Emily remembered Mr. Hayes' words during their first meeting, "Success isn't about what you take, it's about what you give." Those words had guided her every decision, reminding her that true leadership meant lifting others up. One evening, while mentoring a young intern struggling with self-doubt, Emily shared her story. "Sometimes," she said with a smile, "the smallest gestures reveal the greatest potential. Don't underestimate the power of kindness or your own ability to create change." The intern left inspired, just as Emily had once been inspired by Mr. Hayes. And in that moment, Emily realized her work would never truly be done, not because there was more to achieve, but because kindness was a cycle endlessly giving and receiving. As she closed her laptop for the night, Emily glanced at the umbrella resting by the door, a reminder of where it all began. She smiled softly, knowing that no matter where life took her next, she'd carry its lesson forever. Kindness always finds its way back.